Allen Ginsberg is a man who exemplified a counterculture generation of Americans sick of conflicts happening in the time period. This culture of dreamers and peacemakers is not always remembered with reverence in a country with such a large group of conservatives and traditionalists. Regardless, people like Ginsberg were an important part of history. Ginsberg was not someone to depend on societal norms or concessions. He often used poetry to make political statements, speaking for the relatively smaller but extremely passionate group of unique individuals who were willing to reject authority in the name of tranquility and acceptance, among other things. I really enjoyed reading and listening to Howl. I thought that was a really important piece of art. Another one of his poems that I have been exposed to previously is Wichita Vortex Sutra, which is a poem that was written in 1966. This poem is often interpreted as a call to end the nuclear arms race of the time period and all the hysteria that brought with it. He speaks in many different emotions throughout this poem, switching back and forth between order and chaos, love and war, fear and courage, and loneliness and fellowship. He is conveying a sense of confusion by switching between these yin and yang type concepts. He also uses vivid descriptions of rural Midwest America to ground himself with a sense of perspective, and using nature as a form of peace. He was telling Americans to be the change that the world needs. He's telling his friends that a nuclear war would tarnish this world irreparably. And there's beauty in the human form that one can imagine within his words. And it was not too late to save the world, but everyone needs to come to a sense of acceptance for everyone else, regardless of religion or race or whatever it may be, because everyone is uniquely individual and important to the world. And that's kind of what the whole Beat Generation is about. A group of people that reminds me a bit like the Beat Generation is the millennial generation that we have currently. And I know that comes with sometimes cringe and hate, but I actually think the mass amount of hatred for this generation is reminiscent of the Beats, because people are really resistant to these kids because they're not like them. The millennials are very different. Millennials are individualistic and open-minded, similarly to their predecessors, the Beats. While the present generation may be fighting for different, less threatening societal changes, they still err towards a sort of counterculture. These two generations are different than the other generations. And I'm not saying different negatively, but rather they just stand out in their time period. When you think of the present day generations, millennials is one of the driving forces behind American change right now in society. They're up and coming. And that's kind of how the Beat Generation was back in that time period in the middle of the 1900s, where, you know, there's other big groups of people that were making important decisions in America, but there was also this counterculture that, you know, was playing devil's advocate about wars and fighting and hatred and on all this conflict. Is it really right? Is it really the best way we can do things? So I think it's important for cultures to have that questioning mind, to think outside of the societal norms. And I think another thing about these generations that is similar is their specialization in creativity. These people love the arts of all different forms, whether it be music or writing or whatever it may be. I think that creativity and art are things that the Beat Generation and millennials share a lot of. They're totally different in their art, and they're totally different in their creativity, but they have those elements that link them in a way. And I think these two generations, while almost always seeming like the underdog, are important to society, like I was saying, and American history, because they introduce unique ideas through outside of the box thinking. So while they're going to receive a lot of hate, these type of generations, these countercultures, they often are remembered and studied in the future to learn about the past. So I think that's kind of cool.